Money, consumption, status, and power have long driven our culture's pulse. They've shaped our motivations, our behaviors, and our beliefs. But what happens when we give art the same influence? Writers, designers, musicians, photographers, videographers, and the world's most creative minds have the power to heal us, challenge us, and guide us back home to ourselves. In their hands and through their crafts, we find a new world, one where art is a catalyst for powerful change, where self-expression, human connection, and deep empathy are the world's richest assets. This is Art is the New Wall Street, with your host, Morgan Short.
Hi, artists and creatives. Welcome back to Art is the New Wall Street. Today, we're chatting with Noah Lekas, a writer, poet, essayist, and musician. His work has appeared in more than 40 publications. He's written copy and content for more than 50 brands, was a managing editor, and has guest lectured for graduate students. And he's also the author of a poetry collection, Saturday Night Sage. And select poems were recorded for a limited edition vinyl release called Sounds from the Shadow Factory. And then those recordings were transformed into a series of award-winning short films that premiered at film festivals nationally. I'm really excited to talk with Noah, and we're going to hear all about how he juggles all these creative passions and get his thoughts on navigating the job market and the world as a creative. Noah, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So Noah, I started covering this in your intro, but I'd love for you to share just a little bit about what you're working on as an artist right now, and related to that, what it's been like navigating the job market as a creative.
Sure, yeah. Creatively, I have 2 projects rolling. I'm working on a new sort of sonic poetry collaboration album that Blind Owl Records is going to be putting out next year. And it's going to have a little chapbook. So it'll be 6 poems and 6 tracks that are all collaborations with different artists. Can't share too much more about that yet, but it should be out in April. And then I'm also been sort of immersing myself in trying to write a novel, working on that. So those are kind of the 2 big creative projects that I've been doing in my own time. Professionally, or as far as the job market goes, I don't really know where to begin with that. But I went through a layoff a year ago. My last role was a contract role. So the contract ended, and I've worked contract positions for the last 2.5 years, which some people would call freelance, I guess. But it tends to be like ongoing contracts, not just like a one-off, thing here and there. So a little different than a traditional freelance writing career, or maybe a little different than the sort of 5 tips to become a freelancer kind of thing that you read on LinkedIn all the time. That last major contract ended a year ago, and I've been sort of just doing smaller contracts and sort of work since then, trying to navigate the lack of writing roles that is now just our reality.
Do you think you could estimate how many roles you've applied for?
In 2023, that contract role ended. I had a month off, and then I had 2 contracts that took me to the end of the year. So I started really pushing on LinkedIn and applying in earnest in January. I don't know, probably a couple hundred.
How many of those have led to interviews?
Nothing on LinkedIn. I haven't gotten one lead or project or job from putting effort into LinkedIn, which people are disappointed to hear because I had a few posts that went viral. And so people thought, I started getting all kinds of messages asking me how I done that or success on LinkedIn or whatever. And it's attention just does not equal opportunity.
Yeah. One of those messages that you received after a viral post was for me, actually. And I want to unpack some of your perspectives that you shared in this. The reason I was asking you about your experience in the job market is because that's how it is right now for so many creatives, for so many people. The job market is rough, but I want to talk about this viral LinkedIn post that got you and I connected. And then I want to talk more about your creative career. So I'm just going to go ahead and read a little portion of something that Noah posted. Noah says, I don't understand LinkedIn anymore. AI generated posts, so many selfies, would-be influencers that sound like they're about to launch an MLM, and everybody talking about cutting through the noise while not cutting through anything. What are we doing here, folks? I think this industry is about to lose a lot of talent. The ones who landed here for the love of craft instead of love of industry. They don't identify as marketers. They don't wish to become thought leaders. They aren't interested in optimizing their brand. They aren't here for the optics of excellence. They're here to grow in excellence of craft. And I think this industry may be about to lose a lot of them. Marketing was a place where talented writers, designers, filmmakers, and photographers could actively work at their craft while keeping the bills paid. Every project was an opportunity to learn how to write in a new character's voice or learn to deliver a new aesthetic. And the kicker, they were good at it. Damn good at it. Don DeLillo and F. Scott Fitzgerald, among others, worked as copywriters. And the list of visual artists who dabbled in the industry is even longer. Salvador Dali drew the Chupa Chups logo, not to mention Scorsese and Lynch shot commercials, and even Pixar got its start making ads. As earning a living from creative work becomes more dependent of appeasing an algorithm, and staying employed in this industry becomes more dependent on building a personal brand, I believe creative people will find new ways to make a living. They are creative after all. And you go on to say so much more in this post. I think so many creatives are feeling this way lately, Noah, and you captured it so eloquently. What kind of ways do you think creatives might start to find new ways to make a living?
Well, I mean, I think there's a couple things going around. Also thanks. I mean, I'm glad you appreciated it. It was just one of those sit down in the morning and write, and then should I post this or erase it? And decided to post it. And then I went for a walk and I came back and 1,000 notifications on it. But there's a couple of things going on. One is marketing it's a sales business, right? It's like about return on investment. And that's just what the industry is, but that's not what writers and designers and stuff do. So you have people who are craftspeople, they're writers and designers, and they apply the craft to marketing for the benefit of companies. And then you have marketers who figure out enough writing and design to be able to make the marketing that they want, but they're identifying themselves as marketers. And that's how their thought process is. And both are fine. But for so many of us, when I went to college, I didn't know what copywriting was. I never heard it. I went to school for English and I wanted to be a poet and a literateur, I just wanted to write and read books and live in the mountains somewhere and just have a simple life and a very thoughtful, creative life and be really immersed in deep thinking. That's what I enjoy. I enjoy deep thinking. So what's happening is you have all these people who sort of ended up here, not for the marketing. They ended up here for the application of what they love, which is writing or design. And now those people are being told to use AI to be more efficient. And they're going but I'm not interested in marketing. I'm interested in writing. I don't want to use AI to write to be able to market because I'm not interested in marketing. I'm interested in writing. And I'm happy to write for a brand or for marketing or to ghostwrite for somebody or to write an essay on, I've written articles about everything from culinary luxury to literally lawn care, 10 ideas to decorate your lawn for this fall. You know what I mean? When I was younger, I played music a lot with my dad. My dad's also a musician. And I remember playing this gig with him. It was like a cover, just like a pickup band, cover band gig. And we were just having fun playing. And I remember saying something about being bored of the music, I was 17. And whatever song we were playing wasn't what I thought was cool at the time and whatever. And my dad said, well, it's better to play a song you don't like than it is to flip a hamburger. And there's another saying, which is when people complain about work, they say, well, it's a beautiful day to dig a ditch, right? It's I always viewed marketing and branding as as playing a cover gig with music. Like I'm getting better at guitar every time I go play. Like every time I go play guitar with a band, I'm becoming a more proficient guitarist. I'm learning more how the instrument works. I'm learning more how it works with me. I'm learning more what special things I can find in it that other people can't, right? I'm like learning all these things. I'm learning how to feel more comfortable holding the guitar. I'm learning how different tones resonate in different rooms. I'm learning, how to work with different types of people and to be, you know, multilingual on the guitar, right? I'm learning all these things. No matter what gig I go, it could be the most terrible, shitty gig ever, or it can be playing in front of, thousands of people at a festival. If I show up to learn, I'm learning. That's how I've always viewed copywriting.
Yeah.
A lot of people were like that. We just went, well, if I can learn to write in the perspective of a lawn product, or if I can write in the perspective of an iced tea brand, man, when I get to my characters in my novel, dude, I'm going to be able to really get in their heads. And that's how I viewed it. That's how I got into brand strategy. Because I was like, well, I sit around home, figure out character mindsets. Like, what's the difference? Oh, there is no difference. Okay, I can do that. And I'm taking the long route to this answer, but the industry doesn't value that anymore. Like, that's not like, because it's not necessary. And I think creatives, quote unquote creatives, that's a weird title for me anyways, but that whole sector of skill sets, the skill set is no longer the thing, it's the result of the thing. So like the industry is just shifted. Everyone's using AI. They're not asking writers, they're using AI, and that's just what they're doing. And it's like, so what do you do? Sit on LinkedIn and shake your fist and curse the world? Or I don't know what people are supposed to do with that, but I think if you're a writer and you have something to say, you were never going to get to say it there anyways. Like writing's never been a lucrative profession. No one was ever like, I'm going to become a writer so I can be rich. Like marketing is lucrative. And I think there's something really screwed up in our psyches at this point where we think copywriting is writing and content writing is writing, and it's all the same. Like being David Foster Wallace and being David Ogilvy. But you know what I'm saying? Like you're going, like, it's not the same thing. It's like you're you know what I mean? When a literary writer breaks and a book kind of becomes a cultural zeitgeist, it's not a repeatable formula. Whereas like copywriting and marketing is a repeatable formula. That's how it's the business of it. If it wasn't replicable, nobody would be in business. So I think what's happening is that the illusion that these trades are lucrative in culture is starting to unravel because they're being untethered from marketing.
I think good copywriting can still stand out apart from AI. I have not heard that guitar cover song analogy that you used before, and that hit. I entered marketing because I thought it was a way to apply my craft and my love of writing, but still pay the bills and make money and go apply my passion in a way that was practical. And I've applied so much of my creative energy to brands and companies that maybe I'm not aligned with. And then I use all that creative juice up and I go to work on the things I actually want to be writing. And there's nothing left because it's all tapped out. It's so easy for me to get burned out and then view creativity as just another to do instead of like what I absolutely love. Your dad said something about just flipping a hamburger instead. I've actually been kind of like daydreaming about that. Like, would it be better for me at this time in my life to decenter my career from my identity and just like do a bunch of side jobs and practice my creativity just for me? Work on the projects that I believe in, that I'm passionate about, and figure out how to just like build other skills outside of my writing.
Yeah.
Because I have this identity as a marketer. So that's kind of what I was getting at with what kind of ways do you think creatives or writers might start to find these new ways of making a living? Because I do think that there is a choice. And I agree with you that like this world is unraveling a little bit. Every C-suite executive could say, just can't AI just do that? Let's cut costs and lay off people and just throw a robot at that email ad or, that landing page because we can.
Well,
But I also think that that's not going to work for many of those companies. And then they're not going to have strong marketing anyway.
I think that we, as people who have worked in the industry, I think we have to admit to ourselves that, like, if you work at an agency for a year, 20% of what you worked on that year is something that they needed a person for. So much of agency copywriting is iterations and rewrites of what's already been written. Coming up with 15 variations of the same headline. Like, so much of it is menial that I think if we're honest with ourselves, like, the same reason we complain about the jobs not being creative enough is why these other tools can do a lot of them. It's like, we don't get to say that like copywriting's stale and it's not exciting enough and we're bored and we wish we were just writing our poems and then be like, but nobody can do it except for us. Well, if it was really that creative, we would probably be more fulfilled doing it. Right. So I think we have to admit that to ourselves a little bit. But then I also think that, like, you're right. There are people and brands who come out with marketing campaigns and content. And you got to remember, like, things like the Ninja Turtles movie happened because of the comic book being adapted to a Sunday morning cartoon to sell action figures. The line between art and content gets real thin when you start trying to define it, right? And people will define art forever. I feel like, what's the definition of art? Like, I have my definition and it works for me, but like, I don't expect anyone else to agree with me. A great painter, Matisse, said that it's better to dig ditches than to decorate cookies. I think that's the quote. And the quote basically, and what he's saying is, it's better to do labor and to keep your mind clean than it is to use your creativity for somebody else's work. And it's a very valid perspective. Like, a lot of people feel that way. I have a good friend who's a tremendous painter, and he's always telling me that he's like, dude, you should just go back and just go drive a truck.
I've been in that season lately. I've been thinking a lot about it. You have your own definition of art, and I would love to hear what that is.
All right. Well, this is very controversial. Like, most people don't agree with me, but to me, art is anything that is created for the purpose of expressing the self versus something that is made for the purpose of appeasing a need or expressing a perspective for a predetermined audience. So if you're a band and you write you're like, well, we're a metal band and we're going to write a metal song for our metal audience. This is what they want. That, to me, ceases the art. That becomes content. And if you're a brand who is like, the nature of doing target segmentation is the choice of pivoting to content, to me, which people don't agree with me. I've had heated discussions about it and people feel insulted. I'm not saying it's less than, I'm saying it's just, you're creating with a different motivation. And then people go, okay, well, Michelangelo, the greatest works of art in history of the world. And I'm like, well, yeah, if you paint the Sistine Chapel, if it's a commissioned work that's there to express the perspective of the person who paid you to do it, then I guess by my own definition, it ceases to be art. it would be some of the most beautiful content that's ever been in the world, I guess. Then,
Right.
I don't know. So, I mean, it's not bulletproof. Like, I don't know, but to me, that's how I think about it is when I sit down to work on something, I'm either writing like that post you read from LinkedIn. I wrote what I wanted to write because I felt like saying it, and with no comprehension or concern for if it found an audience, if an audience agreed, if anybody read it. I just put it out. I just put my perspective out there.
And so even though that was a post on LinkedIn, which someone may say, oh, that's a piece of content. So
Sure.
you would say that post was art.
Yeah, I would feel totally comfortable putting that post and I've actually thought about making a little book of like all the LinkedIn posts I've done because since January, I've done like 3 or 4 a week, and so much
Yeah.
of them just fall through the radar, and they're all like that. They're all like introspective, philosophical, whatever, but so many of them just fall through the radar. So I thought about like putting them all in the book and just like being, selling it for $1 or something. I don't know what, but
You absolutely should. So let's say you're queen. You're creating, you've got an audience now. Since they have built the audience, they may have written a song or two with their audience in mind. Would those songs stop being art?
yeah, they would cease to be art. I mean, you can bring your creativity to anything. Like, so you can get hired to do a blog post for, a car company, and you can figure out how to work a quote or work your perspective into it. You can do it with anything. You can also like have a whole career under your name, putting out albums or books and not believe a word of it. Like have it not be your perspective at all, just appeasing an audience or trying to speak for an audience, that's not you. I think that would qualify the same thing as content. Like there's this demographic of 40 to 50-year-olds who are nostalgic for, early 2000s or late 90s MTV shows. So I'm going to create this show that's like an amalgamation of all those and market it to them. Like that's content at that point. Like, but you can still put the art of storytelling in it because it's not dualistic. Like you have to think of it through a lens of non-dualism. And I think this is where people get mad at me when I say this stuff.
Well, no, it's just so interesting. No, I haven't thought about it this way, but one thing that's coming up for me as you're explaining this, is it art or is it content test, is just the way that our society is structured. It often kind of forces us to think about, does this have legs as far as making me some money to pay my bills? Are people going to buy this?
Well, that's what social media has really spoiled us, is we think we know what's going to work and we're going to only do what's going to work. And like, yeah, that's how we think about stuff. And the content versus art pendulum, the key with it to me is like, it's not black and white. It's both things. So like every micro decision, like if you ask me this question and I answer it and we're talking and you and I are having a conversation, that's what's happening here. Right. Then this podcast isn't content. This podcast is two people in the creative field discussing topics in their field. Now, if we switch and we start thinking about how is the audience going to feel about this, how's a listener going to feel about what I'm saying right now, then if I do that for one question, I will devolve into that, a performative type of conversation where I'm trying to steer things to make things look a certain way. And people are very good at that. And that's a very important skill set in our modern world for certain type of professions. It's just not what I'm interested in. So I'm interested in like writing as a path to consciousness. Like I'm interested in conversations for the sake of growth. I'm just not interested in that other thing as much, but it's a reality and we have to navigate it. And we have to be honest with ourselves that we do it sometimes. You know what I mean?
Like, why wouldn't we, when this is so wired in us to create for the sake of capitalism, which I think is a huge theft of our creativity in the first place.
People have been trying to figure out the definition of art for centuries. Like, I'm not going to crack it. I'm just saying this is as close as I've gotten.
It's super interesting. I've asked a lot of my guests on this podcast what their definition of art is, and this one certainly has not come up yet. So I'm loving this conversation. What do you think we're losing as so many of us create for algorithms instead of creating for the sake of creating?
Well, it depends what our goals are. I don't think as many people's goals are, like, let's say, artistic, for lack of a better word. I don't think as many people's goals are artistic as we pretend they are. Like, I think, like, you can just see from behavior, like, when people are doing what's working for other people, then self-expression is not their number one goal. Maybe they're in a state where they're going, okay, I'm going to use this to get to the stage so that I can turn the ship around and make it say what I want it to. But it's very tricky because, okay, like that LinkedIn post you read, like, clearly I edited it, right? Clearly I wrote it to a standard where I thought it'd be representative of my perspective and my ability as a writer, right? Self-edit, make sure it's representative of you, make sure it's what you want associated with your name. And this is all like branding stuff. William Burroughs said, to build a good name, don't worry about your work, build a good name, and then your name will become currency. And you do that by doing good work, but don't worry about everything you do being like of such value. Like, just build a good, strong, consistent name so that people, when they hear your name, they associate it with what you want to associate with. It's branding advice from William Burroughs. I think those things are very important. When we turn the corner to writing for an algorithm, we're turning the corner to like best practices. Like, we're writing to what will work or what we think is going to work. And we're writing to somebody else's standard, and we're copying something. Because the only reason we know it's best practices is because it's already exists, or it already exists. Best practices are never something that hasn't been done, ever. It's something that just worked. So, like, that, I just would encourage, I guess, writers or whoever to just, and if that's what you're into, if you want to grow and become an influencer or a thought leader and make money and have a presence online and have a public persona, and that's like your goal, then dope.
Mm-hmm.
People tend to ask me about authenticity and art and creativity and those things that don't really manifest those huge numbers consistently, So my perspective is real. It's fringe on it probably, but the danger of the algorithm is what St. Vincent's, which is like, not that AI will write like people, that people will start trying to write like AI. And that's, or sound. She said sound because she was talking about music, but not that AI will be able to sound like people, but people will start trying to sound like AI. And that becomes the danger. And that's what you see on LinkedIn and stuff like that, where.
Yeah. Well, I mean, AI had to learn from somewhere. Some of these like bad writing habits that AI has picked up on have actually been around for quite some time, especially in the marketing space.
Yeah, for sure. And a lot of marketers on LinkedIn and stuff, they write like it's a presentation. You know what I mean? It's like a one sentence headline, next page, 2 sentences, next page, 1 sentence, next page, phrase, next page, manifesto. You know what I mean? It's like, that's how they write, because that's how they present. That's how they present creative to clients. So it's like, yeah, it's been best practices in a presentation deck forever.
Do artists and writers make great employees?
It just depends what you value. If you value like team players who will like show up on Monday wearing company insignia and talking about how the new employee program is so awesome and get excited because you ordered in macaroni for lunch or whatever. Like, no, that's not, I don't know any writers like that. They're all a little bit contrarian, a little bit deep thinking, a little bit like whatever they're looking at is slightly different than what everyone else is looking at. So it's inquisitive minds, and they, they not to be real power hungry, so they don't move up the ladder as fast, like, all this kind of stuff. The typical creative is content to sit outside and pontificate, but what they are great at is bringing new perspectives. They're great at finding out why something isn't going to work extremely quickly. Writing is where thinking goes to die. Like bad thinking is exposed writing. So, but this is why writers are bad employees, because usually bad thinking is, it's like the number one rule of power is don't outshine the master. So you go get a job at an agency and then you're told to write something. It doesn't make sense or work. You figure out it can't work while you're writing it, and now you're a problem. So it's like, those are all the reasons why they're not good. But the reasons why they're great is for all the same reasons. Like, who's going to have a new perspective. You want someone who never runs out of ideas. Like every writer I know, they never run out of ideas. They got 15 book ideas, 20 movie ideas all the time.
Yep.
If you want those kind of people, critical thinkers, analytical thinkers, people who can dissect something and tell you why it doesn't work. I've seen business owners cry reading manifestos, that's possible. You can work with people and write to that degree and get those kind of results where a business owner of 30 years feels seen and heard for the first time. And that's powerful. Like that's one thing writers are really good at, is making people feel seen and heard.
What happens to the world if we lose a lot of great artistic talent to, I don't know, practicality, or to flipping hamburgers, or to what they think is a creative job in marketing, let's say, and then they never, practice their art?
I think mainstream culture just becomes more beige, it's just more khakis and strip malls, and a lot of people are cool with it. The thing with artists, like my house is full of art. There's art all over the place. I have art that my wife's great grandma made. I have art that my friends have made. I have little chapbooks that people have written. I have, screen printed, hand drawn concert posters. My home is full of art. It'll always be full of art. It doesn't matter if I'm employed as a writer or not. I wrote long before I ever got hired to write. I'll write long after. So the price that's paid is not, I do think there is a collective price of like, I became a better writer working in marketing because it forced me to write for 8 hours a day for 10 years. Like I would have never been able to dedicate that amount of time to writing, or to learning how to write in other people's voices, or all this stuff that is like very, very valuable. And learning how to see things from other people's perspectives, which I always thought I was pretty good at. But in marketing, you're really, with like target demographics and psychographics and all these different things, you're really pushed to really thread the needle on perspectives that, for one, you may not understand, and for two, you probably don't agree with. So it's like, these are all really great things to have learned. So I think collectively there is that downside, which is like, if you don't, it's like being a musician. Like if you don't join a band when you're 17 or 18 and go on tour and play like 200 shows a year, and like you don't get that experience, it's going to be hard at 24 to keep up with the people who did, just because the time spent.
Yeah.
Like, you just can't, if you're working full time and going to school and you're doing all this stuff, and you're not going to school for music, you're going for accounting or whatever, right? So then that's like, you're trying to squeeze in guitar playing. It's just going to be hard to keep up unless you're just so naturally gifted that like, but even then you won't be as good as you could have been, right? So it's like, there's like a time in, time out thing. So that I think is a collective bummer, where some people won't cultivate the skills to the level that they could have in the time that they could have. I still think everyone has the ability to fully realize their potential. We can all get up in the morning an hour before work and write, you know what I mean? Or come home and write at night, or, cancel Netflix so that we have more reasons to sit and write. You know what I mean? We can all do those things.
Yeah.
For the most part, unless life is just so chaotic that you don't have the means to dedicate time to art in any sense. And that is a reality for a lot of people too. And God only knows the art we're not getting to see, read, because people's situations are so chaotic that they can't even think about making some, And so that is a cultural cost that we pay and we don't even realize. But for the most part, artists, writers like myself or you or whoever, I think our homes will still be filled with art. It's just the magazines and the shopping centers and the billboards won't be. It's a bummer because that's the mass cultural aesthetic. But counterculture will never stop. There's always going to be a basement punk show. There's always going to be a art opening in the back conference room of a college. You know what I mean? Or, it's like there's always going to be some kids sitting in a field with an acoustic guitar.
What was the first project you ever worked on that made you feel like you were a true artist?
Boy, I don't know. That's really tough. I never thought about that. You found something I haven't thought about yet. Honestly, I would say with like music, it happened when I was in like early high school, where before that I was like trying to get bands together and play and trying to figure out guitar and how it was going to work. And then I do remember my best friend and I, Ian, coming up with a song together it must have been 9th or 10th grade. And it was not as good as the music we liked, but it was like passable. It was like that could be on one of these, Midwestern emo compilations that we all love so much. It could be on one of those. And that I do remember. I won't go into any more detail of the song, but I can't remember the title of it, but I do remember that feeling. For writing, what was really interesting was I never took writing seriously. In my kind of naivete, I kind of thought I didn't really think it was special. I remember I wrote a few music articles for like a high school newspaper, and I wrote like a joke. My friend and I wrote a joke horoscope, which was just like it was just to be funny, it was comedy writing.
Yeah.
And people like responded pretty well to it, like at least in our little circle. And then I met an editor from a newspaper, and I showed that editor the high school music articles. And then they hired me to write music reviews for the city paper where I was going to college. And I think that was really, as a writer, that was when I felt like, oh, well, maybe this is more than just like something that like anyone can do. Like maybe there's something special. And then that same year, I got hired to write for the city paper. And then I won a poetry competition in school, which is like a best in class, best in show kind of thing. And then, so that was kind of like, oh, I guess I'm like a writer, maybe. And then I just went back to playing music, and I thought, foolishly as a young man, I thought writing was I thought it was like easy. Like, oh, you just walk in, you go like, yeah, I can write that. And then they'll give you a job at the newspaper. Like, I didn't realize it was like a good opportunity and I shouldn't squander it or whatever. So I just like did it for a few months. And then I was like, okay, I guess I have that experience now. And then I was touring and playing music and finishing college and, all the stuff I was doing. And then I kind of didn't really worry about writing again for, a few years, really. It was a few years till I like put my head down and really focused on it again. Cause I just got really burnt out during college writing. It was just getting like an English degree. It's like you're just reading so much and you're writing essays. I just really burnt on it during that whole period. So, but that would be probably the first moment where I felt like, oh, maybe this is a thing for me.
Yeah. Did the burnout there come from just like the sheer amount of writing that you had to do, or was it something else?
You know, I think it was something else. I think it was just trying to figure out what I was doing with my life, And it's like you're going to college and you're,
Yep.
Just music was eating up so much of my life, but wasn't really like becoming a career. It was just becoming like a soft addiction. It was like, it just couldn't stop playing music. It was going too well to stop, but it wasn't like becoming a career, wasn't paying bills or anything, It wasn't growing at a clip that you're like, oh, this is going to blow up. It was just very busy, time consuming. And then I'm like in school and trying to keep up with that. But I was in a school program where the advice I remember getting was just to go to get a master's and become a teacher, which now I kind of wish I had done. I would really enjoy that. But at the time I had no interest in. So it was like, well, what am I going to do with the writing? It was kind of like one of these moments where you read all this stuff and you write all this stuff and then you go like, well, now what? I just 4 years like in these classic American novels and reading literature of the Holocaust and taking Gothic literature classes and this like really heavy, discussing Mary Wollstonecraft and stuff. Like, and you're just really heady, kind of fun. But then you're kind of like, well, do I just go back and work at the factory now? Or what am I supposed to do? Because again, I didn't know what kind of, I didn't even know that was an option.
Yeah.
So, I think that was the burnout, honestly. I just think it was not having a place to plug all that into right away, not really knowing what to do with it. It became real exhausting.
Do you say you would have loved to be a teacher?
Oh, because I've gotten to guest lecture quite a bit. Like, well, not quite a bit. I mean, I've guest lectured like several times at multiple schools for like graduate student. I loved it. I just thought it was so much fun. And I never in a million years would have thought I would enjoy that. I wasn't really into school while I went. Like I didn't really enjoy it that much. Like, so I never really considered it. But then when I started guest lecturing, I really enjoyed it. And you're talking to these rooms full of kids who are like, they have the best questions and they're so excited and they're so critical. And they're thinking like in such an inspiring way. Like they just deconstruct society and go like, why should this be this way? And how come this is working this way? And what can we do about this? And they're just so like proactive in their thinking, at least in like the graduate writing programs, they're all like really analytical, just interesting, creative thinkers, I find that inspiring.
Yeah.
Like I don't, So I definitely have considered like going back to school to try to get a master's and try to pivot into teaching, which is an equally difficult profession to marketing, but if not harder. But it's definitely something I've thought about. Yeah.
Tell me about your poetry collection, Saturday Night Sage, and how that came to be.
Oh yeah. So that came out in 2019. It's actually going to be it's sold out. So the first pressing sold out a couple years ago, but it's going back into circulation next year. There's going to be a new second edition.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So I got hooked up with Blind Owl Records in San Diego through some friends through playing music, and we just got to talking, and the owner of the label was excited about kind of like having, he's real into like a lot of sort of like psychedelic and 60s kind of throwback creative stuff. And there was a lot of cross with like writers and music and stuff. And in that era, a lot of people like John Sinclair and stuff who were doing, poetry recordings with like the MC5 guys and different people. And William Burroughs, did a lot of audio recordings. Kerouac, famously did Pull My Daisy. So there's a good lineage of this sort of like outsider counterculture rock and roll poetry. And so he said he'd be into doing it. And I had already been working on kind of putting together this collection of pieces. And then when he kind of got excited about doing it after reading a few, it just kind of came together from there. And then it was the label's idea to do the spoken word record, which at first I wasn't real into, to be honest. I just thought,
Really?
I don't know. I think I was just felt probably a very vulnerable thing to do, I guess. You'd probably like read my poems over me. I don't know.
Were you the one who did the reading over of your poems, or they hired somebody else to do the voice?
Yeah, no, it's me. But yeah, Dan from Blind Owl was really into the idea, and so he kind of pushed for it. And I told him, I kept like pushing it off, and then finally he just arranged recording sessions. We just started working on it. I mean, this was all before COVID, so we just like jumped in the studio and did it, and then COVID hit, and then we finished up the last track during COVID. I recorded at home on a little handheld recorder. So we finished it up remotely. And then, that came out in 2020. So that was really fun too, though. And that one who did limited edition vinyl pressing of it, and that all sold out real quickly too. It was cool. So it was fun. So yeah, now we're doing a new one. So.
And then, is it right that transformed into film?
Yeah, it did. So here's where the art and the content thing kind of gets muddy too, to admit my own hypocrisy. I started thinking about, I was listening to like a lot of like poetry and a lot of different stuff, but I was like working. So I was listening to stuff on YouTube. And so I would like, listen to like full live concerts on YouTube, or I'd listen to like, certain people reading, or like, there's a lot of like William Burroughs, lecture videos and stuff. Right. So I'd be like listening to David Foster Wallace reading essays, whatever it was, and I just started thinking, I was like, oh, well, if we're going to do this, we should do something that's like that, for YouTube. And then I had like 4 or 5 friends who were just really cool, interesting filmmakers. And so I just started asking if they'd want to do anything. And they all kind of volunteered. And I said, well, if we're going to do it, I want you to just take the recording and make whatever you want to make. You're just going to turn it in, finish. Like, I'm not going to have any say on it, because it's going to be your film based on the poem.
Yeah.
Like, so like my wife did one for this poem called The Word. Josh Zimmerman, a good friend of mine, did one for Steve Roll the Sky. The Jolsons, Kevin and Rebecca, did one for Midwestern, which is actually not on the record. And that one premiered at the Milwaukee Film Festival.
Yeah.
Then my friend Shelby did one for We Have a Problem with Groundwater. And that one, he actually re-recorded the track. So he didn't tell me. He got a voice actor that he knew, and he did like a soundscape, and he re-recorded the track himself, how he wanted it. And then he did an animation, and it turned out just brilliant. It's just beautiful.
Yeah.
And short film. And that one won several awards, and I think played 3 different film festivals. And then Scott Rosenbaum, who's the director of Sidemen, The Long Road to Glory, he did one for a piece called Out of the Storm Drains. And that one won an award at the New York Bowery Film Festival. And I was thinking about how do I take this piece of art and how do I create as many deliverables off of it as I can, the same way that I would at an agency where we'd have a campaign idea.
Yeah.
I just thought, why don't we just do that for this book? Like, I do this for all this other people. Why don't we just do this for this book? And so we just started brainstorming. We came up with, okay, we can have a book, we can have a poster, we can have a record, and we can have films, and they can all be independently consumable.
As you adapted this idea for the different mediums, what did you learn about yourself or about the art itself?
What I learned about myself, I would say, is that what I think every artist hopefully will learn at some point, and I would encourage everyone to think about, is that a lot of times the art is worthy. There's a lot of times like we make things and we put them out in the world and we're like, oh, it just wasn't good enough. If I just sang that vocal part 5% better, or if the title of this article had just been a little better, and that like kind of that like optimization mindset, it's really not, I don't know if it's super helpful. Like there are ways to improve things to make them more consumable, of course, but like, I don't know if it's super helpful for us as artists to think that way. I think the more helpful thing is to go like, no, the work is worthy. So if the work isn't getting out there or isn't finding an audience, don't blame the work. Like, let's start looking at the connection problem of like, how do we connect this to an audience or to people who will like it, or people who are at least sympathetic to this sort of creativity or this sort of creative impulse. I remember playing a demo I had a friend who was like he was a pretty successful musician by my standards. And I remember playing him a demo and I remember him saying, it's worthy. Like, it's plenty good. Just go do it. And I remember being like a little frustrated with that, because I remember feeling like, well, then why is it not happening? It's much easier to go like, oh, it's not good and my art's not good, and if I could just make better art, that's a much easier pill to swallow, because it doesn't require anything of you but to become better. It doesn't require more effort. Like, you don't have to try harder. You don't have to tackle the parts of the business that you don't enjoy. You just have to focus on if I'm just better. But it's like the tree falling in the woods thing. It's like part of how you become better is by seeing how the things you make ricochet and bounce off of other people and in culture and what people ask you about. And like doing podcasts and interviews about the book, I was asked similar questions to today's conversation, but I was also asked a lot of very different questions, things that I hadn't thought about while writing the book. How do I view, things like, people ask me a lot of stuff about like being working class and blue collar mindsets and politics and things that I don't like. Politics to me isn't something I'm super excited to talk about on podcasts. You know what I mean? But there's an implication in the book. So now I'm having to answer questions about it, right? So it's like you start to see how these things you create bounce off people and ricochet through culture. And it informs how you create other things, because you learn where you're being effective in expressing yourself and where you're not. So somebody comes to you and goes, oh, well, why did you say this? Like, how come you think that? You go, well, I don't think that. And you're like, oh, but that's what they got out of the thing that I said. Okay, so that's not the most effective way to express myself, right? Like, so you start to learn that the work is worthy, and so much of the growth and the improvement that you desire comes from seeing how the work interacts culturally with people. It's like,
wow. Not only is the art worthy, it's worthy at it's worthy right now. And sometimes the energy of the moment requires you to get it out right now. And if you keep saying it's not done, it's not done, it's not ready, I'm not ready, like, the world might need that art where it's at right now.
Well, in the world, hell, one person, you know what I mean? Like, what do we think? One person reads what you write and it makes their day a little better. Like, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing. If your dharma really is writing or, poetry or photography or whatever, if that really is your dharma, you will accomplish it through just existing. Like, existing is the work. You know what I mean? Like, the work is existing. Part of it is just what I learned through doing the book. The biggest takeaway, I think, is that it's just going like, I had other poetry books I never published. I just sat on. I had essays I never published. I had, I have so much. I've been writing for most of my life. Yeah. Like, it's just, that was the one that was like the right one at the right time to hit print on. And that was awesome. But, You sort of learn like putting out the work is part of doing the work. And you learn
Yeah.
a lot by doing work.
They're all of those works that you have that went unpublished, that's all still art. That's all still you expressing yourself.
Yeah. And some of it might be better than what got published, and some of it's definitely worse, but it's all part of your process
Right.
and your work.
Yeah.
And I think, that was like that was a big lesson in that. And I think that's just, yeah. So, and then what was the other question? What did I learn about myself?
Yeah, yourself and then, the art itself. I think
Yeah.
you kind of answered both of them.
Yeah, I think it's kind of both. Yeah, I think what I learned about the art is that getting it into the world is part of the work of making it. And then what I learned about myself was that the work had always, like, the work was worthy. I just needed to not siphon my efforts so much. Like, I needed to go like, well, I learned how to do this for brands. Why can't I just do this for my book? There's no reason not to. So, okay, I'm just going to go ahead and think about this like a content funnel, and like, how can I help the label? How can I use my marketing experience to help the label push the book harder than it might have without my efforts, But that being said, Dan was the one who wanted to do the spoken word record, which is really what turned the corner, because I was content to just have it be a book.
Perhaps a bit resistant.
I was, yeah. Yeah, we wanted books, I didn't dream about, YouTube videos when I was a teenager. I dreamed about having a book that was, my collected works. I try not to be like a formatist, who's too dedicated to like certain mediums. I try not to let myself fall into that, but I do sometimes. I really like writing. I like printed writing. I really like physical media, and I always have,
All right. Noah, before we wrap up here, are there any upcoming projects or things you're working on that you want to plug? And where can our listeners get their hands on your collection?
Yeah. So right now, the book and the record are both out of print. The record you can get on any streaming platform. You can buy it on Bandcamp if you want to support the creation of new art. Otherwise, you can stream it for free on other streaming sites if you want to support the gross overpayment of streaming suite professionals. The book is out of print right now, but it'll be back in print through Blind Owl next year, along with a new EP that is going to be coming out in April through Blind Owl. You can follow Blind Owl Records on all the social platforms. You can find me on Instagram, which is at Noah C. Lekas. You can find me on LinkedIn by just searching my name. You can find my website is noahclekas.com if you want to send me a message or anything. And upcoming projects is just that EP, and then trying to get this novel out and looking for a publisher for that. And hopefully that'll come out next year too. So we'll see what happens with that one. But that's all I got going on.
Well, thank you, Noah. Thank you for coming on the show and for sharing more about your world with us. It's been really cool to hear about your experience. I'm so glad we connected. You have incredibly interesting perspectives on the world and creativity and art versus content. And to all of our listeners, thanks for tuning in and hanging out with me and Noah today. Keep creating and keep making magic. Your art is a gift to you and the world. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Art is the New Wall Street. If you liked what you heard today, give our show a follow or subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can find us on social media or at artistthenewwallstreet.com. Keep creating, and we'll see you next time.